Hello, and welcome to a podcast from the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith. Dr. Ann DeSantis here with Carlos Solorzano, our beloved board member. He's also a Catholic author, speaker, and also an educator for many, many years. He teaches theology in a Catholic high school. Carlos, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you again for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Yes. And even though we've done so many episodes, I always like to give you an opportunity just to enlighten our audience in case we have any newcomers a little bit about you. So anything you want to share?
Sure. Like you said, I've been teaching for a long time. It's been a love of my life, and it's been a great journey, faith journey too, because I learn a lot from my students, my colleagues, and really just having to always figure out ways to present the material in a changing world. And yeah, I keep myself busy outside of that with some writing and some public speaking, a little bit of music, and just to be creative. And I'm also kind of figuring things out personally because my youngest has just finished high school. So not that I'm still not a dad, but it's just that now my children are both older adults, and it's just sort of have to learn to find my own self and purpose and things to do while they're living their lives.
Yes. You're doing so much. You're always
Yeah.
juggling so much with your family life, your kids, your wife, everything. I give you so much credit for all that you do, and even taking the opportunity to join us for this podcast means a great deal. And this is the Our Lady, Our Mother podcast series, meaning that everything that we look at on the series is through the lens of faith, through the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And on this podcast, we are discussing annulments, Catholic annulments. We already did two podcasts. One was on separation of marriage, which, unfortunately does happen. We always are praying for marriages. And then divorce, which would be considered like civil divorce. And on this podcast, we're talking about the annulment, which is that next step that as Catholics, some people take in order to declare that the marriage was something was missing from the beginning. And it's actually a decree of nullity. And so, Carlos, I don't know, being that you're a teacher, you get to interact with a lot of families, you get to talk to a lot of people. Um, do you know people, or have you heard anything about annulments? Because I know that you have been teaching for quite a long time. And annulment sometimes also what it allows a person to do is if there was something missing from the beginning with a marriage, that person gets the annulment. And then many times they do go on to remarry and maybe even have another family after the divorce. Didn't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Sure. Well, obviously it comes down to, I mean, I brought it up in our last podcast about the priests, asking my wife and I, is there something you need to tell the other person that if they knew they may reconsider marrying you? Essentially you have been deceived in some way. And I'm not trying to say that a person's bad. It's just they didn't disclose everything. And or sometimes the couple, I think, needs to look in the mirror and ask themselves, did they do this for the right reasons? So like for example, a lot of times, especially with that whole, at the time we're shooting this, it's July, so that whole incident at that Coldplay concert just came out, and obviously it's been this big uproar about marital infidelity. But a lot of times you think to yourself, well, is there something going on in this person's personal life that before the marriage that you didn't know about, that obviously you wouldn't marry them? But when the priest that my wife and I went to that married us, it was interesting because when he came back, um when we told him, yeah, we're good, we're going to go through with this, he didn't use infidelity as an example of annulments. What he actually told us was a story of a couple he married where they got married, and about 6 weeks after the marriage, because I mean, and you probably had this happen too, where you go get the mail and you get all giddy inside because you get this envelope and suddenly it has both your husband and your name on it. So it's like, oh, honey, look, we have mail. And so, when you get married, you now are attached at the hip with everything. So the wife had apparently had gone to the mailbox, and she was surprised to see this envelope from a casino in Reno, Nevada. And um, at first she thought it was one of those, somehow everyone knows your personal life. So she thought it was one of those resorts that, was giving them like a vacation package or something like that for a honeymoon. And since her name was also on the envelope, she thought, well, fine, I'll go ahead and open it up. And long story short, it turned out while her husband went to his bachelor party in Vegas, he didn't tell her that him and his buddies jumped on a plane and went to Reno because they thought they'd have better luck gambling up there. And somehow he incurred a $60,000 debt up there. And the casino was asking when now they were planning to start paying it back. And this was before the wedding. So she's like, why didn't you, she was really upset. Like, why didn't you tell me about this? Because now she's on the hook for $60,000 to a casino. And obviously, that was something he should have told her, and he didn't. And then also, the other thing is when I mentioned the whole notion of, why are you getting married? Because I've been seeing a lot of people talk about now people are getting married, like they get ready for the wedding, they don't get ready for the marriage. So they're looking forward to the big party, but are you thinking about what you're getting yourselves into? And everything from that to you want a spouse, but do you want to be a husband or wife? Meaning, you want that person to be there for you, but do you want to love and take care of them? So, a lot of times we're not getting married for the right reasons. Like I remember when I got married, I was 25, and my wife and I knew some people that were already married. And, it's not like we were kind of a little, I guess you'd say, somewhat envious of that, but it also wasn't our right time. It wasn't, we weren't ready yet. And then, I know people who got married later in life, and it's okay, that was your time. So sometimes we do it because everyone else around us is having this life, and it's like, well, I want that too. And that's why, like, I remember when I turned 30, my wife had this friend who was, we were about the same age, and we ran into her, and she was single at the age of 30, and she was doing well. And she said what was really bothering her was that her parents kept leaning on her about, when are you going to get married and give us some grandkids? And she'd get upset at her parents saying, I'm single. I just haven't found the right situation yet. But, why doesn't it matter to you that I'm telling you over and over, I'm happy? So there's so many, I guess, wrong reasons why we're getting married. And when you're doing that, you're not treating the other person the right way.
Amen. And thank you for sharing that. I can back up what you said based on the fact that some people are not getting married for the right reasons. Being the executive director for this nonprofit, where I get to interact with people who ask for priestly consultations from us, meaning they reach out to us because they have questions of faith. And one of those questions of faith has to do with divorce some of the times and even annulments.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard many stories about things that people get married and they didn't know something about a spouse, or that they had this particular habit, or there was something that they were hiding, or maybe an addiction that just got really to a point of like almost impossibility. Not to say that addiction is always a reason for an annulment, because really there's a whole process. It's a decree of nullity. It has to be that at the time of the marriage, was there some circumstance or something, some kind of impediment or something that would block the sacrament from actually happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people who have addictions can get help and they can become somewhat cured. I mean, it's always an ongoing thing with any addiction, right? You have to continue with maybe with meetings, sometimes of an alcoholic, Alcoholics Anonymous, or different kinds of methods of healing. So it's not a once and done thing. We know that. But I think everything you're saying is just spot on.
Thank
I
you.
also found something on my own archdiocese website. It's from the archphila.org. I'm in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, and it's from the Metropolitan Tribunal. I'm just going to read this paragraph because I think it has some very good information about annulments. It says that divorce is a reality for all people, even for Roman Catholics. The Catholic Church respects the validity of all marriages, not just Catholic marriages. There are divorced persons who seek to remarry in the Catholic Church. In such cases, the Church will consider the divorced marriage to see if someone entered the marriage with an understanding, ability, or intention contrary to the Church's teaching on marriage. The church can examine the presumed valid marriage bond to see if the bond really existed. A declaration of nullity is declared by the church if the marriage in question is judged to have been null and void from the very beginning, thus enabling the persons to marry in the Catholic Church. The tribunal, through the annulment process, exists to help people participate more fully in the sacramental life of the Catholic Church. That makes complete sense because when people get divorced, and if they were Catholic, and if they want to get married again after this divorce, then they would need to consider an annulment. I can say that in my own family, I have seen that happen. My very own parents were annulled and then got remarried again, and it was a process. And so, if you're listening to this podcast, and if you're divorced and you're thinking about seeking an annulment, I think the first place you need to go to is your own church, the priest, the pastor at your church. Talk to them about it. Your pastor or your priest might suggest that you contact your diocese or your archdiocese to talk to the office that handles that, or to the bishop. And that would be in ours, it's the Metropolitan Tribunal Office of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. And ask those questions because it is a process. There's paperwork that needs to be done. It would involve your ex spouse. So it's not a once and done thing. It does take time. So I just want to mention that too on our website. If you go to our website at nonnatus.org, on the for the divorce page, we have a link to a 4-part series that we did on annulments. This series was done. It was done a number of years ago. I think it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, but it's still everything's valid on that show that we did. It was with Father Matthew Phelan, myself, and also Father Sean Bransfield of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, answering those questions with a priest. And I know it's to this day, it's a very popular video on our YouTube channel. You can even go to our YouTube channel, Philly Nonnatus, where you're listening to this, and they're actually videos. You can watch those videos. So I just want to recommend that to those who are listening to this podcast. Carlos, did you have any other kind of comments or just any knowledge of people that you knew that have gone through that process, or just any other theological reflections on it?
Sure. I know that I've had relatives who have gone through this as well. My parents were, married till my father passed, so it wasn't them. And when we found, it was kind of interesting because obviously certain things, even with your aunts, uncles, or cousins, whatever, it's personal and private. So, whatever they chose to share. But there certainly were moments where they found out later, well, like something would come out during the marriage. And then once, the discussion happened, and of course, the big question is going to be, well, how long has this been happening? And of course, once it comes up that, well, it's been happening since before we got married, it's like, of course, the big question, why didn't you tell me? Now, what's interesting about that is, it's that thing again about status and being in a hurry that I always bring up with my students is this is why you should take time to date someone, court someone, whatever you want to call it. You're going to have your ups and downs. You're going to see their quirkiness, the silly things that they do, like those real knucklehead moments you have. And just a lot of that, I think, presents itself to also make you comfortable around the person. Like there's certain things that are embarrassing for all of us. And, one big thing I remember learning from, Christopher West at Theology of the Body Institute was, love, the definition of love is to will the good of the other. So it's kind of like when you show the person that you are the value of what means something to me, not what you have or what you do. And the more you show that on a regular basis, that they're going to feel safer with you and blah, blah, blah. Like when I would cover stuff like that in class, I would always use this clip from that movie, not P.S. I Love You, sorry, Walk to Remember, where, and I tell guys, sometimes you have to watch those chick flicks. There's a lot of wisdom there. But there's that scene where the young man says to the girl, he's like, I might kiss you. And she says, I don't think I'll be good at it. And he's like, that's impossible. Because he wasn't going to kiss her because, she had this reputation for being the best kisser in town. He wanted to kiss her because he wanted to express his love to her. It wasn't about, how perfect she was in the eyes of the world. It was already how perfect she was to him already in his eyes because he saw the goodness in her. And, we all carry these burdens of our baggage, of our flaws, of our hurts and all that. And sometimes we don't see, what someone else sees. But in time, when you go through all that and there's that level of comfort, then you begin to see more of how really committed someone can be. I mean, I can think of times my wife and I dating, came close to splitting up. And it wasn't about, well, we're planning on getting married. It was really what made us stay together was we loved each other, but also we're like, well, I take this very seriously. You are that person that I don't want to lose you. And, you've made this huge difference in my life. So it's kind of like you're, and of course, sometimes you have to really let your guard down to say that because we're always trying to protect ourselves. So, and then sometimes when that happens, then you start sharing things about your life. It could be addiction, it could be some, secret you have, or whatever flaw, whatever burden you're dealing with. And of course, if that person already loves you, they're going to do whatever they can to help you. And I think that, also I think what helped both of us in our, dating life was times that we both spoke to each other's mothers, especially. I mean, I remember one time my wife and I having an argument and we were on the phone and I got really frustrated. So we got off the phone and I got in the car and I went over to her house and with her parents, she wasn't home. And her mom said, no, she's not here. And I don't know why I did this, but at one point I was standing at the door and I said, could I talk to you? And she said, sure. She let me in and we sat at the kitchen table for like an hour. And I told her, kind of what was going on. And I said, I don't know what to do. I mean, I'm not mad to the point I don't want to see her anymore, but I don't know what to do. And she said, okay. And so she started telling me about her daughter. And in the
Wow.
same way that my mother has sat with my wife and, okay, let me tell you about my son. And it's like, it was such an insightful thing for both of us because who knows you? We talked about this with other podcasts with, Mary and mothers and all. Who knows you better than your mother? And it's like,
Mm,
I mean, why? That's why Catholic weddings are in the church, in the community, because they want the community to support the couple. I mean,
yes.
like the
Mm,
godparents are there for the child at baptism. Well, what do you think the best man and the maid of honor are there for? I mean, and I really want to share this because this is to me a huge thing.
please.
My best friend was at my wedding, and he, God rest his soul, loved him to death. This man never got married, and I'm not going to get specific, but let's just say he and I had a very different moral persuasion. Okay. And I'm going to leave it at
Hmm.
that. But he knew me because we met in the second grade and we're at my wedding reception. And he flat out looked at me and said, bro, you know me. I will never get married. I don't even believe in this stuff. He goes, but I know you love your wife. I know this is what you want. So if you need anything, I'm here for you. But I'm going to tell you right now, man, you do her wrong, you're going to have to deal with me
Oh, wow.
because he knew what I stood for. As a friend, I mean, I've seen atheists, scold Christians. Why are you acting like this? This is not what you believe in. Stand
Mm,
up for, come on, stand up for your principles. So it's not just a matter of, oh, the church is trying to control it. No, first of all, you should be saying these vows before God, which should tell you right there how serious it should be. But at the same time, um, the community is supposed, it's not just the big party that day, the community. And if the thing I've learned is not just for my career, but I love to people watch. And I saw this great documentary about this, and people can see it. There was this pro wrestler named Ted DiBiase, and he played this character of a rich guy. And he talked about since he was in character, like the organization he worked for literally um like paid to make it look like he was rich in character. And he admitted to getting caught up in all of it, and he was unfaithful to his wife. And I tell you, Anne, it was one of the most powerful things I ever heard. One, he had to go home and own it. Two, she didn't just leave him, they went to counseling. And three, there's a lot of points too. She didn't tell their sons right away. And she told him, I'm not telling them anything while we're going to counseling because our sons still have you on a pedestal and I do not want to take that away from them, which I'm sure was very hard for her.
Mm,
Four, she was a Christian woman. And when some of her friends asked her, why didn't you leave him? She said, because I know there are sins I have committed, terrible sins I've committed, and Jesus forgave me. So how can I
mm.
not try to forgive my husband? And it was amazing because later in the documentary, his sons found out later in life what happened. They didn't know for a long time. And they confronted him. And he stood there and he owned it. And he told them, everything you feel about me right now, you have the right to feel that way. I deserve it, blah, blah, blah. And, and he let them, even when I think his youngest son, just let him have it. I can't believe you treated my mother like this. And
Mm.
son, you are absolutely right. And what's so amazing is through years and years of working on their marriage, they both admitted we love each other more now than we ever did. And she actually openly said, I trust him more than I did when we first got married.
Mm.
It was
That's
just, it's the
profound.
power of Christ healing us. And it's just, but I credit the maturity of them because she easily could have been upset and rightfully so. And but she didn't forget how imperfect she was. And I know his sons were able to deal with him because he didn't make excuses for it.
Wow.
Um,
I love your
oh,
stories. Yeah.
oh, so
I
do I.
didn't want to cut you off. Is there anything else?
No, it's just I'm just I let people know a lot. That's what I love about teaching and just meeting people is a lot. I just sit and hey, tell me stuff, tell me your story. And I love documentaries, whatever, because there's so much to learn and it challenges us.
That's right. We learn so much from other people. We learn from history. We learn from reading. But I mean, I think we learn from experiences of other people and our own experiences.
Hmm.
And we learn from things like this too, don't we?
Yeah. And
From a podcast like this that's trying to unpack a little bit. And
mhm.
so I hope that it's helping you who are listening, uh, hearing this because there's so many intricacies to life, relationships, marriage, and even divorce and annulments too. And I just want to read two more things. We are headed toward the end of the podcast, but I thought this would be interesting for all of you from archphila.org on under the annulment process. So a civil divorce is something different than obviously from an annulment. So it says before anyone can initiate a process for a declaration of nullity, civil divorce for the marriage in question must be obtained and finalized. The completed civil document demonstrates for the church that the civil marriage, in fact, has been definitely broken and is unable to be reconciled. And then another thing is when you go through with an annulment, there will be preliminary questionnaire and documents. And it says here that the petitioner, that's the one who's beginning the process, is asked to complete a questionnaire about basic facts of the marriage in question. Documents such as a recent baptismal certificates for Roman Catholics and certified marriage and divorce decrees are required for everyone at this time. I just wanted to mention that because you might be listening to this podcast and maybe you know nothing about what you need to do to get an annulment. All I'm going to say is that the first step is to talk to your pastor or to your bishop or contact your diocese or your archdiocese. And if you are having a hard time there, you can contact us at nonnatus.org. Just go to our contact us page and I will get in touch with you and arrange an appointment for you online with one of our priests, and he can answer some of your questions too. So we're happy to do that. Remember, this podcast is the Our Lady, Our Mother podcast, and we are interceding for you to through the Blessed Mother, for you, for your family, for your past, present, and future. And we're here for you, and we're praying for you, as I said. So, Carlos, as we kind of wind down, I didn't know if you had any other like words of wisdom to share to those people who might be divorced and possibly headed toward annulment.
I tell you, it's really important to they talk about you are the company you keep. And, I mentioned, Christ healing, I mentioned the church. And I know like at one point in my marriage, my wife and I were having a really hard time because, every couple goes through, you know, moments where you're literally sitting down discussing divorce. I've been there too, multiple times. But I remember the first time, um, and you have friends who will sit there and say, I think maybe you should consider ending this. But I remember, besides, I mentioned before how, we were both thankfully raised by parents who, they always taught us, you have to work your stuff out. But I remember the first time we were having this problem. I mean, we had a lot of friends who, they were like, look, my parents, they would just bring it up. They worked it out. You got to work things out. It's going to be tough. And the other thing too was that I was so blessed to have people who were like, I can tell you guys love each other. You guys, I really think you guys should really put the time in and work it out. You guys are a beautiful couple. You guys are great for each other, blah, blah, blah. But most, aside from that, keep in mind, don't be in a hurry. Like take the time. Life is not a race with everything. I mean, when it comes to your personal life, you do what you have to do for yourself. And for some couples, I mean, you hear stories of, the husband proposes to her on the first date and they get married and they're together for life. And then some people, it takes them a lot longer. It's not a race. You do what's best for you. And, take the time to see each other. I'm not going to say at your best and at your worst, but see them where they're not at their best. And, like where you're going to see, let them frustrate you, let them, question you, challenge you, whatever, because, that's who you're going to live with. And then the other thing is, people, I always kind of laugh at this when they go, you're not the person I married. Yeah, and of course not. It's been 15, 20 years where everybody changes. It's
Yes.
like, it's like,
Amen.
that's where the commitment's a discipline. It's a, it's a part of your values and principles. Like, I believe in, these ancient cultures, when you gave your word, you'd rather die than break your bond. What happened to that?
Wow. No, that's something to really think about. And even for our listeners who might be already divorced or somebody who's divorced and seeking an annulment, think about these things if you are going to get married again, right? I mean,
Hmm.
so it's obviously it's for anybody, but it's also for somebody who's seeking to remarry. So,
Hmm.
Carlos, thank you so much again for joining us, and I'm excited for our next episodes.
Me too. Thank you.
So, to all of you, we will see you next time. Our episodes air the first Tuesday of every month at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the Philly Nonatus YouTube channel and on the Philly Nonatus SoundCloud channel too. So thank you again. God bless, and we'll see you next time here from the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith. God bless.